Welcome to the National Center for Learning Disabilities Advocate Academy 101. It's our third Advocate Academy on IEP preparation for Texas. Woohoo! And with you, as always, are your trusty hosts, Susan Reynolds. I'm the NCLD field organizer, and I have a child with ADHD and a recent visual motor processing disorder diagnosis. And I'm also an adult with 2 learning disabilities and ADHD. And our fabulous co-host, partner in crime, dear friend is Amy Trainer.
Hi, I'm glad everybody could join us. A little bit about me, I'm an occupational therapist and assistive technology professional by trade, but the best part about my life is getting to parent 2 amazing kids, one of which has a specific learning disability and dyslexia, and professionally getting to do this and helping NCLD and writing for a newsletter and all kinds of fun things. Lots of little feathers to put in my cap.
Heck yeah. So let's just dive right into it. We are talking today about IEPs, which means we need to know a little bit about where they come from, and they come from a special education law called the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA. We went over in our very first Advocate Academy at length about IDEA, and what this federal law is that provides students with disabilities with an IEP. And so I'm just going to quickly review this information here so we can get to the actual prep side of IEP preparation. IDEA was first passed in 1975 and was called the Education for All Handicapped Children Act. By 1997, the law was renamed to the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA. And the primary purposes of IDEA are to provide a free and appropriate public education, FAPE, to children with disabilities. And the second is to give parents a voice in their child's education, which is why you're here attending this Advocate Academy with us. IDEA receives almost $12 billion in federal funds each year to serve 6.6 million children, teens, and young adults with disabilities. And moving on. And there are 5 key concepts with IDEA, and those are the free and appropriate public education, which is FAPE, again, child find, least restrictive environment, or LRE, the individual education program, IEP, and procedural safeguards, which are, how things are going to be done. And I feel that, and Amy, you feel the same way too, we both feel that it's important to remember what the purpose is of an IEP. Why are you doing this? It's not just to simply ensure that your child is being educated according to their strengths, their weaknesses, their needs, and according to whatever their diagnosis is. There's an actual purpose. And this quote is actually from the U.S. Code from the actual law. Disability is a natural part of the human experience and in no way diminishes the right of individuals to participate in or contribute to society. Improving educational results for children with disabilities is an essential element of our national policy of ensuring equality of opportunity, full participation, independent living, and economic self-sufficiency for individuals with disabilities. One of the things that I like to tell parents to please ask as they're sitting down in these meetings is ask these questions. Are we ensuring equality of opportunity for my child? Will they be able to fully participate? Will they find ways to become independent? Will they achieve economic self-sufficiency? If you're answering yes to all of those questions, then yay, great, good for you. But if there's a no or a or a maybe anywhere in there, it's time to make sure you sit down again and look to this purpose to make sure that those questions become yeses. Amy, do you have anything you want to add?
No, I just think that is a brilliant slide, and in a little bit we're going to talk about how to kind of prepare and organize yourself. And I've shared that this right here is an excellent cover for that binder that, that you're going to have, because it just keeps keeps it on everybody's mind when you've got that binder at your meeting and you've got this, what is the purpose of what we're doing here, right there in US code. I mean, it's not something you made up.
No, this isn't made
This
up.
is
It's right
real.
there. It's the
Yep.
law.
Happens to
Woo!
be, right.
Well, we're really excited.
We are.
So before the IEP, or in Texas, as you all like to call it, the ARD meeting, here's what you need to know. Now I'm going to hand it over to our parent leader here in Texas, because I am not from Texas. And while I know a little bit about what you all do, I will consider Christy. I see that we have somebody named Christy here, but I'm going to talk to Amy and have her be more of our expert. So
yes, it's a
no
whole
pressure.
other country down here in Texas, so we just do
no
it
pressure.
our own way.
But that's okay, because part of what happens with the law is that that the states can interpret. Now, sometimes that's not always great.
Right.
But yeah.
That's the way it is. All right.
That's the way it is.
We're going to talk about requesting an evaluation. And first, we want to talk about why would we request a special education evaluation, and then we'll talk about how to go about doing that. So we have to remember that the purpose of this educational evaluation is to determine if your child does in fact have a disability that would make him or her eligible as a child with a disability. By definition in IDEA, there's 13 categories, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Whether they have a disability, and if it rises to the need of needing specially designed instruction. That's kind of the criteria for the IDEA. And this evaluation is going to help gather all the information that will help decide what your child's needs actually are. An initial evaluation actually that is individualized is required before anything can start, because if you don't have that evaluation, you don't have the data, you haven't identified what the needs are, you can't really design an appropriate educational plan, whether that's just the education, whether it's related services or whatever. So that's the starting point of the evaluation. And then reevaluation, of course, occurs at a minimum of every 3 years, because our kids are growing, right? They're growing, they're changing, and their educational needs are going to change as well. So having that 3-year mark gives everybody an opportunity to say, okay, let's do another snapshot. Where is this child now, and what are we planning for? So parents can, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to say, if I can jump in as soon as you're done, if you don't mind.
Sure. So a parent can, of course, request an evaluation. So what you really want to make sure that you do is that every bit of communication is completed either initially or as a follow-up in writing to somehow. Okay, so you can do that in an email or a letter to your campus principal, to your campus school psychologist, school counselor, and then the school can decide whether they want to pursue the evaluation or not. But either way, the parent will receive a copy of the procedural safeguards as well as a prior written notice. And that prior written notice is just how the district is going to move forward or not with the request. So if the school does agree with the evaluation, which I'm hopeful and confident that most would, you will also get opportunity to complete an informed consent to evaluate form, which is giving your consent to letting them do the evaluation.
Yeah, exactly. Something else, another thought on the evaluations that maybe parents haven't thought about. As an adult with 2 learning disabilities and ADHD, the evaluations matter, especially in the long run. As our children are growing, these evaluations become more and more about ways to ensure that they are getting both their educational rights met, as well as their workplace rights. Now, in the workplace, that's a whole different beast, and they're not going to actually ask for the educational evaluation. It's just a verification. But at the same time, when we start talking about college, higher education, standardized testing, I had a heck of a time getting accommodations for the GRE because my evaluations were so old.
Right.
And I actually had to go and find a psychologist that would read over my evaluations to essentially re-verify my diagnoses. And I thought, I'm an adult. I had this done when I was in my 20s. This is ridiculous. But that's the thing, is these evaluations become almost like a guarantee, I guess, in a strange way. I don't know if that's the right word, but they really do help protect your child in the long run as they go into their early adult years.
It establishes that history of existence.
Yes.
Right. You really want that, that the path that you walk down, right? What you got. This isn't something necessarily new, although IDEA could be, or 504 could be used for something new. And I love that you brought that point up, because as a former provider in the schools, I did see a lot of times, and I really would want parents to be aware of why they would want to go ahead and do that 3-year reeval, even though if your child has a learning disability, the learning disability is not going away, right? We know in ADHD, it doesn't go away, but the impacts that it has on an individual over time do change. And you do want to measure the academic, the achievement differences, right? Like you want to be able to make sure that we're actually making progress in those areas that are influenced by your academic experience. So just as a little sidebar, make sure you're doing them.
And here we go, the next one.
So of course the school can ask for a special education evaluation, and honestly they should be the ones requesting them the most, I would assume, if they're watching the data. But the school can, so if they want to, again, it's going to be in writing, and they have to obtain your consent to evaluate. Okay, so what you really have to be aware of is that the school initiates, they send you this form or have a meeting of some sort to get your consent, that the timelines for that evaluation don't actually start until they receive a signed consent from you saying, yes, you may evaluate my child. So you want to make sure you don't sit on that, and that you get that back to the school if it's not done in person. Okay. So we're going to fast forward a couple of weeks, and now your child has been evaluated. Everything has been completed, and you want to review the reports. So everybody, the campuses should be, best practice is to provide copies of assessment data in well enough advance for a parent to have time to go through them and have their questions answered. If you're not feeling the vibe that you're going to get that, go ahead and request it. You can request your child's records, the educational report, and schedule a conference or a call before you have the IEP meeting, or the ARD meeting is what we call them down here in Texas, to review what they identified, what their findings were beforehand. So a couple of people that you can call to help. Of course, you can call whomever it was that is doing the evaluations at your child's school, or if you don't know, you can ask your teacher, the principal, psychologist, diagnostician. And then of course, Texas has a plethora of resources for parent support in navigating and looking through documents and evaluation reports. So of course, every professional, as I mentioned, that had conducted an evaluation for your child should be able to discuss and willing to discuss their report prior to the meeting. You know what, can we go back just one? Because I was going to talk about for a half a second some good questions that you might want to ask.
Oops, sorry, I went ahead too fast. Sorry about that.
No big deal. Just because if you're doing this for the first time, and maybe if you're doing it for the third or fourth or whatever, just some good ideas to ask that. What assessment tools specifically were used? What kind of data was collected? What strategies are you suggesting as a result of that data that are going to be able to be implemented in my child's IEP? So just to kind of give you an idea of what you're looking at, and moving forward, kind of what you're going to watch to be impacted by the educational program. Now we can go on.
Okay.
Awesome. Okay, so like Susan said at the very beginning, one of the most important features of the revision was the implementation of greater parental rights in IDEA. They really, our federal government wants parents to be an equal partner, right? You're not a halfway player. You are right at the table. You are helping to direct the ship for your child's education. So as a result, IDEA does provide parental rights. that protect you when you're advocating for your child. So those are, you have the right to an explanation of the procedural safeguards under IDEA and your state. You have the right to participate in the meetings related to identification, evaluation, and placement of your child. You have the right to obtain an individual educational evaluation, an IEE. You have the right to receive prior written notice relating to identification, evaluation, and placement of your child. You have the right to give or deny consent or revoke consent. That's another important piece that we don't have right there. And you have the right to disagree with decisions that are made by the school. You also need to know that as the parent of your child, all of the school records belong to you. It's not the schools, they're the records of your child, so they're yours. So you can gather and review any information that is related to your child beforehand, before that meeting. So whether that's the evaluation report we've been talking about, homework samples, classwork tests, standardized tests. We do a lot of, district assessments, all kinds of things, screeners, anything that you can think of that might help bring some information to the meeting and help it make that opportunity to meet a more productive experience. The other thing is you can invite other people to the meeting that you feel would have an impact in your child's experience, whether that's a physician, maybe a psychologist if they have one, a neurologist, even a good friend or a family member, or maybe an advocate that you've hired, or someone that can just be there by your side, because these are not always easy to sit in as a parent, and it's nice to have that support.
Also, I can throw this little tidbit in for parents who also have disabilities. You have an additional set of rights and protections under the Americans with Disabilities Act, and I highly encourage that you take advantage of them. I ask for ADA accommodations and accessibility when I'm advocating for my son, and I let his school know, hey, these are the things that I'm going to need so that I can have accessibility when I'm advocating for my child. Honestly, if we're talking, like certain forms of compliance, like wheelchair accessibility and things like that, the school should already be that way. But if they're not, let them know. But that's the thing, is that there are additional rights for parents out there, especially parents who have disabilities. So don't forget to let your child's school know those things.
Right. That's great.
Am I doing this one?
That's yours.
Oh, yay! Terms, acronyms, phrases, all the fun language that we have in IDEA. And this is only some of it. This isn't even all, there's that much. We picked the stuff that we hear the most, I think. These are the phrases and the terms and the acronyms that we're going to hear the most. The biggest one, and one of the most I feel is important, is to get used to hearing the word disability. It is the federally recognized term that is used when talking about your child's or your young adult's life. This is the term that gets them their rights. And again, it's the federally recognized term when dealing with individuals with disabilities and their educational rights, their workplace rights, all of it. One of the other phrases is a behavior intervention plan, or a BIP. And it is, as the name implies, we're talking about intervening with certain behaviors. We know from seeing this, from being around our own kids, having an undiagnosed disability, especially a learning disability, it can be very frustrating. And some kids are going to act out really different. When my brother, before he received his diagnosis, he actually did act out and spent half of 5th grade in the principal's office because of it. He was in a lot of fights, right? My acting out was completely different. I was very hyper and loud, and I was also equally in trouble. So
were you rowdy?
Yeah, I was a little rowdy, but I was so frustrated.
Right.
Because I knew I was learning different from the rest of the kids, and I knew I wasn't keeping up. And so my frustration got the best of me. And a behavior intervention plan would have really helped to monitor those behaviors, to make sure I wasn't getting in trouble for something that I couldn't help.
Right. And the BIP, I think a lot of times parents and even staff kind of have it in their mind that it has to be an aggressive and outward loud and about kind of behavior, but the behavior is anything that's detracting from that child's ability to participate and benefit from their educational program to the degree that it needs a special intervention program. So it could be withdraw, it could be different
Tears.
things. It doesn't necessarily have to be, I can't sit in my seat, I'm not following the rules kind of a thing. It can look totally opposite, but still rise to the level of needing a BIP.
For my son, he cries heavily. He's very quick to cry because he's so frustrated. Yep. And he then he cannot continue to move forward. And he too would have benefited from a BIP this past school year. An independent educational evaluation, IEE. So this is one of those cool things with the parental rights that if you disagree with what's going on, guess what? You can ask for an independent evaluation, the IEE. Federally, we call it PLOP, the present levels of performance. In Texas, you guys call it something else, but we are talking about where is your child academically? What is their level of achievement? I'm a big fan of saying this, you gotta know where you're at so you can know where to go. If you don't know where you're at, then everything is lost, right? It's like being on a map. It's like, you see that you are here, right? Well, right. That's what your present levels of performance are going to do for your child. It's you are here. Now we know this, and we can move forward and get them to the next place, right? Every year you will meet and talk about goals. They are annual goals. And those are, we will be discussing those in just a few minutes, but get used to talk about annual goals. Especially designed instruction, SDI. This is an instruction that's been modified, tweaked a little bit, or maybe, it's as again, as the name implies, it is specially designed for your child because this is, again, an IEP, the individual side. Assistive technology, or AT, that is just the most amazing things. We did, our second Advocate Academy was all about assistive technology, and it really helps our student population to be successful, to level that playing field, to provide them equity. As your kids get older, because we all know they're not growing, they're growing up, not back, right? You're going to start talking about,
except those teen years, they might feel like you're going back to toddlerhood.
I know. But start talking about transition plans as you start looking, as your kids are getting out of 8th grade and going into 9th grade. I personally recommend that early because it's vital.
In Texas, I think most districts, it may be a Texas requirement, I'm not sure, but I know a lot of that discussion happens before the child's 14th birthday.
Yeah. And then the Office of Civil Rights, OCR. So on the U.S. Department of Education's website, you will find the Office of Civil Rights, where if you disagree with what's going on, you see some kind of violation, you need to file a state complaint, you can go to the Office of Civil Rights on like I said, the U.S. Department of Education website, and there it is, and you can do that. It's one of the dispute protections that parents have. Now let's get to all the Texas terms.
Awesome Texas terms. Okay, as we mentioned, here in Texas, the ARD meeting is the admission, review, and dismissal meeting, and that's just what we call our IEP meetings. ESC is the Educational Service Center or Support Center. The state is divided up by TEA in regions. So there is an Educational Support Center for every region of the state that then in turn provides support, training, all kinds of things to the districts in their region. LPAC is the Language Proficiency Assessment Committee for students who are dual language speakers. The STAR, or the STAR Alt, that's our state assessment of academic readiness. The STAR being the one that most students take, and the STAR Alt being one that you have to, the ARD committee has to determine that you meet the eligibility criteria for the Alt. TELPAS is the Texas English Language Proficiency Assessment System. It's a mouthful. And again, one of those that is specific for students that are dual language or English as a second language learners. The TEKS, the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills, those are what our whole curriculum, what the state of Texas feels like every student in the state of Texas should be learning at every step of the way. And if you haven't ever looked at them, they are quite fascinating. And that's another thing. And I don't know if we put it in our slide or not, Susan, but when we start talking about the binder and organizing every year, I, for my own child, print up the TEKS for current year and future year to help really know and align IEP goals to what the TEKS requirements are. TSB,
we call these the standards of learning, the SOLs.
Yes, yeah, everybody calls them different things for different states. The Texas School for the Blind and Visually Impaired is in Austin. TWC, Texas Workforce Commission, that's a really helpful organization when you are starting that transition and post-secondary, how they can really support at that point. DARS, Texas Department of Assistive and Rehabilitation Services, another really helpful organization when you're doing the transition planning. And then SpedTex is our Texas Special Education Information Center, and they are super duper helpful. They are amazing. You can reach them by phone. I've been known to call them in the middle of our meetings, on a recess for myself to ask a question, is this what should be being done? And they can provide you with some really great resources electronically as well. All right, here's our PLOP. We call it the PLAF, the Present Levels of Academic Achievement and Functional Performance. What this does is this statement, or this part of the document, really describes how your child is performing in not just academic areas, but also the functional areas that include daily living or self-help, their social skills, behavior, sensory, communication skills, and mobility. This is also like the most critical point for your parent input. This is where you can document your concerns and anything that you see as far as a strength or a challenge of your child outside of the school building and outside of the school day that they may not be aware of. The team, the ARD committee, is required to describe your child's present levels. As you begin this process, this is really what drives the IEP, because you're taking your strengths, your child's strengths, your child's needs, and as a result, developing the appropriate goals and appropriate supports that are captured in this statement of functional and academic performance. So make sure that you aren't holding back if you have concerns, that you really get that in there and documented at this point.
Moving on.
All right, goals. So we want to know how keep your PLAF in mind when you're writing those goals. Like we said, it really drives what supports, what instructions needed and what supports are going to be needed. When you're writing these IEP goals, they need to be SMART, and that's an acronym, but they need to be SMART and really reflect your child's present levels. So let's talk a bit about what does SMART mean. Okay, so SMART stands for specific, measurable, using action words, they're realistic and relevant, and they're time limited. So the specific aspect, that's what goal, what area of academic achievement and or functional performance you're going to target. They are clearly described of the knowledge and the skills that will be taught and how the child's progress will be measured. It's really important also to know that when you're talking specificity in a goal, that you are not trying to put a lot of areas in one goal. You don't want to measure a lot of different areas in one. You want one goal for one outcome. Measurable. So this is how you know how you're going to know when you get there. Susan used the map example. Here's where we are, here's where we want to go. That measurability are going to be kind of those stepping stones. This is how we're going to actually document that we're on the path to achieving this goal. That helps parents and the educators know how much progress the child has made since that the last performance data was collected. When you have a measurable goal, you know how the intervention is benefiting. You can see the changes taking place and how your child is going to reach that goal, or also be able to recognize, we're not getting there the way we thought we would, what needs to be tweaked in this program. Using action words. The IEP goals include 3 components that need to be stated in really measurable terms. So you're talking about the direction of the behavior. Are we talking about increasing something, decreasing, maintaining? In what area of need are we talking? Are we talking reading? We're talking about writing, social skills, transition, all the different areas, and the level of attainment. Where are they going to go? Are we talking an age level? Are we going to talk about a level of independence, maybe without assistance? And then using action words like Johnny will read at a 4th grade level, blah, blah, blah. We have an example in a few slides, but really making it actionable. Then realistic and relevant goals and objectives that address your specific child's individual needs. They need to, it's a statement of the measurable annual goal that includes the academic and functional goals that are going to meet the child's needs that result from the disability, to make sure that the child can be involved in and make progress in the general education curriculum, and also meet each of the child's other educational needs that result from the child's individual disability. So it has to be individualized, and it needs to be realistic and relevant, and as of Andrew F., also more than just minimal progress. There's a level of expectation that is more than just a little bit of progress, which I love. Thank goodness for Andrew F.
Yep.
And yes, and then time limited. So if we're talking annual goals, we're really talking about what can this child and educational committee, what can you achieve in a year? What does your child need to be able to do or need to know in 1 year with special education supporting general education? They allow you, these time limited goals, help you monitor and know when you need to be benchmarking and how you can monitor the success. So the goals are updated annually at the IEP meeting because everybody's growing and changing, right? We want to see that year of growth, and then benchmarked throughout the year depending on how the ARD committee determines. So what you really want to do, and I hope take away from this, and we say it a lot, but really create that written list of questions and concerns. And sometimes, I keep a file open on my computer or on my phone that it's like, oh, when I'm at this point again, I need to ask this, or, going through documents, just making sure that I have those notes so that it doesn't slip my mind when I'm in that less than comfortable situation at the ARD table. Because, we as parents are the experts. We know our kids the best and are a good bit of the process. So we need to make sure and share our input.
Exactly. And here's a great example.
Yes, here is our example that kind of helps illustrate moving through the process. So we just took a little statement here, one related to Alex and his reading level. I guess Alex could be a girl. I don't know whether we even have any pronouns to help us know that. Anyway, so from the PLAF, we know that Alex is in 5th grade, but reading at a 3rd grade level with 50 to 70 words per minute and 4 to 6 errors when he's doing that or she is doing that. So we know that if you're in 5th grade, we need to be, up in the ante and reading at 5th grade level. So our annual goal is going to be, given 5th grade material, Alex will read 120 words per minute with only random errors. And so to ensure that Alex is meeting these goals, there's our pronoun, his goals.
Yep, our one pronoun.
Our one pronoun. I didn't scan fast enough. We will progress monitor and report at 9-week intervals. And typically they coincide with report cards. So after 9 weeks, given 3rd grade material, Alex will read 110 to 120 words per minute with 1 to 3 errors. 18 weeks, we've upped the ante to 4th grade material. And changed the word per minute a little bit because we've made it a little bit more challenging. We recognize that it's going to take a little longer to get through that. And then after 27 weeks, given 5th grade material, Alex will read 70 to 100 words. And then at the end of the 36 weeks, which is what your goals for your annual goals are, then he's reading at 120 words per minute with only random errors. only because this is a reading goal and that's very near and dear to my heart. There are references and expectations that these numbers and grade levels are pulling from, just FYI. So it's not just kind of like, oh, this will be a good idea, but that's where knowing your state expectations really comes into handy to know if we're writing a grade level expectation goal, that's the goal. How are we going to break it apart to provide the instruction to get them there?
All righty. Managing expectations. The hardest thing, I actually have to say, I think that this is the hardest thing to do, right? Because I sit here wondering all about the what if, what might happen, you know, and it's impossible to know what will happen during your child's IEP meeting. It really is. You have no idea. If you have a crystal ball, awesome. Could you please share it with me so I could learn all of these things, right? And so I started to try to rethink so I wouldn't be so stressed and I wouldn't have such high anxiety, to be honest. And I started to rethink how I was doing things instead of, you know, guessing and asking about what might happen. I started to think about as I read over the evaluation reports again, I started to look at goals, that potential goals, my suggestions, right? I started to ask questions. What does it mean? How are you going to get my son to X, Y, and Z grade level in math, right? I started to observe my child more in the home setting. And especially now with COVID, I've really been observing a lot more, right?
Right.
And I think that has actually been in a really bizarre way. I think it's helped parents so they can really truly observe how their children or their child is learning, right? And so I started doing these kinds of things. I started documenting all of this too, so that I would have all of these organized thoughts ready to go before the IEP meeting, right? The courts, so like our, you know, federal courts, state courts, and mostly the federal courts, they like to use the Cadillac and serviceable Chevrolet comparison, right? We're gonna go in and we're gonna want the Cadillac of educational services and supports, right? But schools are only required to provide a serviceable Chevy. Andrew changes that a little bit because it's not two minimum, right? It's not this bare bones minimum anymore, right?
Not talking the base model.
Yeah, but I also think about it like this. I have a really different twist on this. I like to go in asking for the stars, the sun, and the moon, right? If I only walk out with the stars and the sun, I'm feeling a heck of a lot better because I walked into that meeting getting absolutely nothing for my child. If I'm walking out with just one thing that can make my son's education and his school day better, well, that's one thing that he didn't have before. And I also look at it as another way. The veneer has been cracked. That means there is my foot is now in the door and now I can move forward with asking for more next time, right? I've already agreed to one thing, maybe even two things. Woohoo! I'm going to wear them down, right? Like that's how I look at it. So I don't want to look at it as a defeat, even though sometimes it's hard to say, you know, like that's easier said than done. But at the same time, I'm looking at it as he was receiving absolutely nothing. 50% is better than 0%.
Right.
So,
well, and I think with the expectations too comes the knowledge that with us and the specific population of individuals we're talking about, those with learning disabilities or attention differences, it's pretty clear cut, right?
yeah.
If you've got your state expectations of grade level achievement, in your whatever you call them, the TEKS, and you have this evaluation report that identifies what in that those are going to probably be difficult, right? And some strategies to support those. Really, it should be a nice marriage of here's what we need to do, here's how your kid is going to do it, and what do we need to do to support that. So I like to mention, you know, we talked about it the other day, is that when you have your expectations and you have things that you want to include in the IEP, that sometimes making like a neat grid or something and being able to document the school's response and making sure that they know that you're going to expect that to be accounted for in that prior written notice is a really good way to let them know that you're serious about making sure that they are either agreeing or refuting with adequate reasons to your request.
Okay.
All right, documentation. This I probably was a step ahead with my recommendation with the chart, but really from that very moment that the conversations or the exchange of information takes place, whether you're sending that letter in to the school requesting the evaluation or they're asking you for consent, everything needs to be in writing and you need to keep it all. I cannot stress that enough. And honestly, I think looking back and knowing that sometimes disabilities are not identified as quickly as they should have been, that from the minute your child enters school, you really need to keep documentation. And it seems very overwhelming, but on a personal level, knowing where we are with my daughter in 5th grade, we're needing to talk about things that did happen and should have triggered more investigation when she was in kindergarten. So that was long before we recognized there was a true need. And so, you know, as a parent advocate, I just implore other parents to just stay on top of that from the get-go of your record keeping. It's really up to you how you want to organize that material. There are lots of systems that you can download and buy or for free or design your own. And it can be, you know, I love the IEP binder, at least for your annual things, to be able to keep with you and at a finger's grasp when you're in that meeting. But you can also store and organize electronically. We have a Google Drive and there's a million folders for all the different things, so I can go immediately and find exactly what I need when I need it. And then one of my suggestions really is to confirm with your school and your district about their policy for audio recording meetings. Like we've mentioned a couple of times, it's a really stressful, high anxiety situation. And when you're in those, your memory is gone. You know, you walk out and you think, oh my gosh, what just happened a lot of times, you know, and I really encourage parents to audio record their meetings so they have that to go back and reflect upon. And it really should be no big deal. A lot of times, I know in Texas, when we ask to record, the district just wants to record as well. So it's just 2 recorders going. I use an app called Otter AI, and it's really helpful because it actually does some transcribing for you as well. So really just keep everything from the very beginning that's in writing in a way that works for you. All right, and before the meeting ends, please know going in and going out that you do not have to sign that IEP, that you agree or you disagree in the moment. You do not have to sign that paper at the meeting. You can ask to take a printed copy of the completed document that you created as a committee, hopefully, in that moment, and read over it and make sure that you have the contact for person who you need to return that to, or if you have any questions that you unearth when you're reviewing it, to be able to do that. So you want to make sure that you know, when is your child's IEP going to be implemented in the classroom? Do you know if they're getting a therapy or psych services? Do you know when those supports or services are going to start? And you really want to be able to devise a way to really track your child's progress at home as their #1 advocate, to be able to watch for those trends, hopefully in a positive way toward goal achievement. But if not, to also be able to trigger and say, hey, wait a minute, we're not making the progress we wanted to see. We need to revisit this plan. All right, so here's some articles and resources from this presentation. We talked about FAPE. Here's some articles about FAPE, about the IEP, Child Find, the least restrictive environment, the procedural safeguards, and then your permission to evaluate here in Texas.
Even more.
Yeah, even more.
We have a lot of articles we're sharing with you. So these are all the hyperlinks throughout the presentation. And I think that the Organizing Your IEP binder is actually from Understood. They have a free download and with tracking sheets and everything like that. So you gotta do what works for you when it comes time to documentation. And that is moving on to more resources. So these are some of the national resources we have out there. NCLD, obviously, I'm gonna put us as #1. Edutopia is really good. Learning Disabilities Association of America. Understood.org is another one of my favorites because they're really good at breaking down complex information. And they do fun videos too. You have the Council for Exceptional Children, Parent Center Hub. You can go on there, research your state, and you will find your free parent center wherever you may be. And because Texas is massive, you have a lot of them in Texas, of course.
Exactly. Yep.
And then Rights Law and COPA are both great resources as well. When it comes time to IEPs though, and goals and state specifics, it is the best thing to look to your state, to your local community, which brings us to
Our state and local resources.
our state and local resources, your state and local resources.
Yep.
And you guys, we keep building on these. So you don't have to read all of them, Amy, because we're going to send out a PDF of this presentation as well. And then let me scroll through this really fast. Look, yay. I don't really, of course, I don't know anything about them because I don't live in Texas, but my great things about SpedTex, especially.
I added this. These
yes.
are the two resources, the Parent's Guide to the ARD Process, which is a helpful document, as well as those procedural safeguards that really outlines what the process is and how to do the IEP. It's if there's a dispute, if this or whatever, it's all the ins and outs. And I thought it was amazing, and I had to include it in here, all the languages, all the languages that are these documents are available in. So it really speaks to our worldly global experience that we have, and it's awesome. I love to see all those languages being represented.
Yeah, we have that in this area too. I love that. I think it's so cool.
It is, yep.
And helpful for parents.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I mean, yeah, let's help them.
So and those documents should, like I said, we said that they should be provided at least initially in a hard copy by your district. But you know, we're all kind of digital age, so if you want to have it downloaded and handy for you, they'll be continually updated by those links as well.
So you can connect with us. We have our social media channels, NCLD on Twitter. We are on Facebook and we are on Instagram. If you have just some general information questions, you can email us at info@ncld.org. If you have questions about our policy work, you can email us at policy.ncld.org. And not to be outdone, this is the third in our series of 5 advocate academies. Hyperlinked, which is why they are blue and underlined and bold, are the very first 2 advocate academies. And we're doing this so that they can build on each other. Right? We're trying to give you some foundation so you can build on them. And so the first is, of course, an introduction to IDEA and Section 504. Last month, we did assistive technology, which is so unbelievably helpful for our student population. Today, we have the how to prepare for an IEP meeting. Next month, we're going to be talking 504s because I know Texas is particularly fond of 504s. And actually, you know what? A lot of states are becoming that way. My son, actually, we are now getting ready to have an IEP, but he's had a 504 the entire time. Although it's been treated much like it is an IEP. So it's been very strange. I find that very confusing, and it really does kind of make things difficult.
Yeah,
it does. It muddies the waters, and it really does. I think it actually adds to parent confusion. Even though I'm teaching this stuff, it does add to parent confusion, right? And then we want to tie all of this together and start talking about the transition. As your child is growing up and they are going out into the world as an adult. Let's talk about how all of this hard work, all this blood, sweat, and tears, right? Let's see what it's done. And so we have a Young Adult Leadership Council. And so we're hoping, fingers crossed, we can get a couple of them in to talk about their experiences on how their parents' advocacy has helped them today as young adults. And I'm really excited about that. And then we have our 201 series, and this is a different kind of advocacy, actually. So we're talking, you know, the parental advocacy, advocating at your child's school for your child, or helping others get through that process. Then we have the other side of the advocacy coin, which is the state and local and the federal. And the state and local, in my opinion, this is the stuff that is this is state and local advocacy is your everyday life. We're talking school policies with your school board. We're talking accessible sidewalks from the city council, making sure that they are repaired and working function and working order, right? This is everything. This is when your state's legislator, what is it? You guys meet every 2 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is your legislative year coming up, and yay! Well, in 2021. So that'll be really interesting to see. And this is, how do you share your story? How are you, finding out information, researching, fact checking, understanding policies, and how to take your story, your experience in advocating for your child. How do you turn it into an actionable story that creates long-lasting change? And that will be the same at the federal level. We're talking about federal laws. Yes, they're implemented at the state, but IDEA, 504, ADA, disability employment policies, these tend to be federal laws. So how do we do all of those same things at the state level, but now do it at the federal level? So we're going to be talking about those. I'm thinking November, December timeframe. So please be on the lookout for those. And then I think we're done. Yay. So I'm going to stop recording now, everyone. Thank you, Amy, for being here. And I just want to, I don't know. How do I stop this? Okay, stop recording. Thank you. Sorry.